Welcome to the last module of the class. We're going to discuss the endocrine system and really focus on only a few parts of the endocrine system. Our outline, we're going to do an overview of the system and what it means when we say hormones and glands. And then we'll focus on two systems, the adrenal gland, which controls our long-term and short-term stress response, and the pancreatic islet cells, which control blood sugar. Our first set of learning objectives are to compare the nervous system with the endocrine system, describe the functions of the endocrine system, define hormone and target organ, and explain how hormones bring about their effects in the body and how endocrine glands are stimulated. So first, let's compare the endocrine system with the nervous system. So they both coordinate activity in the body. However, they do so at different speeds. So the nervous system acts fast. It uses that electrochemical signaling, so it's able to go across the body almost instantaneously. The endocrine system is slow. This is the system that uses chemical messengers called hormones that are secreted from glands. And these hormones will then move through the circulatory system and go to the target organs in disparate parts of the body. For the endocrine system, the tissues are all scattered throughout the body, unlike the nervous system, where the tissues are all connected to each other. And again, because it secretes into the blood, the endocrine system has a much more prolonged effect. For the nervous system, the neurotransmitter, the chemical part, is secreted and released right there in the synaptic cleft, can impact nearby cells, mainly other neurons, and is then quickly broken down. But the endocrine system has a much longer duration. The endocrine system also controls a lot of diverse processes, so things like energy balance, reproduction, growth and development, stress defense, electrolyte, water and nutrient balance, and cellular metabolism. And again, for this class, we're really just going to focus on stress defense and nutrient balance. First, we need to understand what hormones are. So hormones are secreted by endocrine cells into the extracellular fluid, and it regulates the metabolic activity of other cells. And they come in three classes: amino acid based, which can either be larger proteins or small peptides; steroid based, which, remember, steroids are a lipid; or a unique category called prostaglandins, which we're really not going to talk about. Hormones then circulate, but they only affect a target organ. So all of the organs of the body may be exposed to a hormone, but the only ones that will respond are ones that have a receptor that will specifically bind to that hormone. And this effect of binding to the receptor will then change the rate of normal cellular processes. And it can have a bunch of effects, things like changing the plasma membrane permeability or electricity, causing the synthesis of a protein inside the cell, altering an enzyme, either turning it on or turning it off, causing the cell to undergo mitosis or stop undergoing mitosis, or maybe causing the cell to secrete something. Remember the plasma membrane? Take a minute and see if you can answer these questions. So what kinds of things can easily cross the plasma membrane? What do other molecules use to get across the plasma membrane if they can't get through themselves? So pause this video and think about those questions. Okay, so let's think about the chemistry for a second. I know chemistry can be scary. Stay with me. So steroids are a lipid, and so steroid hormones can easily pass through the lipid bilayer of our plasma membrane. And usually they pass all the way through into the nucleus where they bind to their receptor, and then that hormone receptor complex usually has an effect on the DNA and will cause the synthesis of mRNA for a specific gene, which will then be made into a protein. Non-steroid hormones, usually things like proteins and peptides, will activate what we call secondary messenger systems. So they'll bind to a receptor on the plasma membrane, again, because they're usually hydrophilic, and so they can't pass through the plasma membrane. And so they'll bind to that receptor on the membrane, and that will cause an enzyme to make a second messenger, something like cyclic AMP or CAMP, and that will cause a further effect in the cell in this second messenger cascade. So not through the direct action, but more through a long signal cascade. And finally, we have three ways that hormones can be stimulated. So glands can be stimulated to release hormones. The first is by other hormones. This is a hormone cascade where we have one gland makes a hormone, that affects another gland to make another hormone that can affect another one, and so on. So the classic example is the hypothalamus to the pituitary. So the hypothalamus is going to make a hormone that tells the pituitary, release your hormone. And that hormone goes to another gland and says, release your hormone. The good thing about this is we can get feedback at multiple levels. So the hormone made at the very end can go and signal back and turn off the production of that first hormone from the hypothalamus, for example. And it also can be rhythmically released. So we can have hormone levels that rise and fall and rise and fall, and they can each be tightly controlled because of the multiple steps. The example we'll talk about is the hypothalamus to the pituitary to our adrenal glands in times of stress. The second way endocrine glands are stimulated are by humoral stimulus. So humor is body fluid, not laughter or funny things. So levels in the blood can be the signal themselves. And this is classic negative feedback. For example, with blood calcium, the levels rise, a hormone is released, and then as the levels fall, the hormone is turned off. The example we'll focus on is our blood sugar. Blood sugar rises, we release insulin, blood sugar falls, insulin gets turned off. This is that classic negative feedback loop. And the last way is the neural stimulus, and this is a super fast way. Again, nervous system speed. So we can have our sympathetic nervous system target a gland and tell it to release a hormone. And the classic example is our adrenal glands, which will release catecholamines, epinephrine, and norepinephrine. And it'll work with the sympathetic nervous system to prolong and extend the effects of that fight or flight response. So in this first part, again, we covered a few different topics. Make sure you review them, and next time we'll jump into the hormones.